If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You seem to still be up there somewhere.
Maybe I am. There are flying saucers.
Supposing they're Martians or something in there.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Asherz, and this is
Tobias.
Tobias. How was your weekend? First, I gotta tell you a story first before I ask you about your weekend.
We got to get this story going.
I had a dream that we did our episode last week, and it came out, and then you disappeared. You didn't die. You disappeared.
Okay.
And everybody in the community was upset with me because, you're gone now, and they had no clue how your last weekend was, and it was all my fault.
Wow.
So it has been burning in my brain. I need to know how your weekend was. Also, I made that up entirely. I didn't actually dream about you. Sorry. I don't remember my dreams.
Because I literally just told you that nobody, before the show, I was like, nobody wants to hear about other people's dreams. That's
you did.
That's conversational poison.
You're right. Bad move on my part, Dan. Sorry, everyone.
No, it's all right. No, you weren't actually telling anybody about a real dream, so it's
exactly.
fine.
I was telling a lie, right? And we're
Right.
kind of used to that. So, people lying. So that's better. Anyway, Go ahead. How was your weekend?
It was good. I have been kind of working on an interesting UFO sighting that I'll have written up as an article later this week. So I don't want to get too much into it now. But I was doing some work on that, just kind of communicating with this witness, which was interesting. I had some friends over on Saturday, and we played Traveler, which is an amazing science fiction role-playing game of space exploration. So it really can kind of simulate anything from like Firefly to Star Trek to The Expanse, just anything that even approaches hard sci-fi, really. So that was super, super fun. I'm a big fan of Traveler. Anybody who listens to this show, take my RPG recommendations seriously. I know what I'm talking about. If you like sci-fi, you should get into Traveler. Personally, I play the most recent edition, which is the Mongoose second edition of Traveler, which I highly recommend. So, but otherwise, I didn't do shit because we're still in my relaxing period between busy times. We've got Frogman coming up in what is going to be a very short amount of time. It doesn't seem like it right now, but it's going to be like March 1st before you know it. So I'm just enjoying not doing anything for now.
Getting ready for the crazy times at the Frogman Festival.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. No, I feel that. I did a lot. I did a lot of course, writing. I got to get this book done by Frogman. Somehow I can do it. And by doing a lot of writing, what I actually mean to say is I watched 2 different TV series and started a new video game. So I'm not adulting very well right now.
Nailing it.
Because I'm like, well, I need background noise, right, in order to write. I can't just sit here in silence. I've got bad ADHD brain. Background noise, it's constant in my house. If you like silence, don't come over. So I'm like, well, okay, what I'm gonna put something easy on, just something that's real simple, that I don't really have to pay attention to. And I've actually been ever since, oh my God, I have one podcast that I listen to now. And it's kind of your fault. It's kind of not your fault. It's kind of the listener's fault too. Everybody always compares our show to Last Podcast on the Left. So
okay, that's a good one.
It is. It is. Well, I've been listening to it. And initially I was like, well, let me listen to it because like obviously like those guys are doing really well with their podcast. So, what's the takeaway there? What are they doing really well? How can we get our listeners up to their listener levels, right? So I, kind of listen to it more as like a study. God damn it. And now I like it. And now I'm going back through the whole catalog listening to it. So anyway, what does it have to do with me watching stuff? Well, I decided to watch the entirety of Your Pretty Face is Going to Hell. And
Okay.
um I watched it. Some of the Adult Swim stuff, it didn't age well. To be
No.
fair. This was actually pretty good. There was some stuff I was like, wow, that's pretty edgy for today's standard. But I enjoyed watching the whole thing. And kind of got too into it. It was actually sitting and fucking watching it, like soaking it in. And I'm like, this is distracting. Well, I finished it all. And then I started watching Squid Game season 2, which you have to kind of watch. And then before I knew it, I was like, what am I doing? What's happening here? I'm like, well, maybe I should take a break from all the writing that I did. And maybe I should do something else for a while. So I fucking started playing, and Tobias, you'll know this one. I started playing Stardew Valley, which was a huge mistake because I
Okay.
love it.
Yeah.
So I've got a problem. I just need to go. I need to go on like a writer's retreat, right? And just go and fucking pump this thing out and just be done with it. God, it's so close. And I don't know. I just hitting the finish line has been tough. So,
It is tough. I
whew,
know exactly what that is like. What's helped me this last book was having a deadline that was non-negotiable because I signed a fucking contract.
yeah, I
That
need that in my
helped a
life.
lot. I had to be done. I didn't have any choice. And so I made sure that I was, because when I've written my books by myself, I could always just set the deadline for whatever I want. And if, I would set one and be like, oh, well, I'm not going to make that now. I mean, who's going to fire me? I'm not firing myself.
Right.
So I would just push it back, and that was fine. And I've never ended up pushing it back a lot. But it is the kind of thing where there were no consequences. So I absolutely could and did whenever necessary. Um, so I feel for you. Frogman Fest is going to be tough. It's going to be real tough at this point, but anything's possible.
If you only knew how close it was, I could probably submit and print what I have right now. That's how close it is, and I just keep fucking not finishing it off. I don't know. I don't
Huh.
know what's wrong with me. But that's why I chose Frogman Festival as a personal deadline, because if I had that and if I told people it was going to be there, I don't have a
Right.
fucking choice, right? I can't show up without the book now. So, or I'll get feel free to chase me out of the venue if that's what happens. So anyway, that's what I've been doing. A whole bunch of nothing. And I need to get my shit together. Well, in between that, of course, we had our episode last week. I have gotten other interesting information in regards to Jack Overby and his very riveting contactee story. Um, but mostly from director Lance that we had on last week. He's got more stories to share from Jack. He says he's been coming over a lot of stuff. He's actually showed me some really neat things. Behind the scenes pictures and stuff like that. But he says he's probably got about 20 more minutes of stories that he's going to upload to YouTube from
Oh,
Jack.
cool. Okay.
So that'll be neat. But nobody else has really come forward except for I know what I showed you. The only person that's had any type of negative response so far has been one of the family members. Which
And which side of the family?
that would have
Is,
been his dad's side of the family.
okay, so this is McKinley's side.
Yes. Yep. So that would be one of the McKinleys. We haven't been able to track down surviving because Lance is kind of on top of it too. Poor guy. He's so far down in this rabbit hole now.
Yeah.
He's texted me about it all weekend. Which I know how it is. We know how it goes, Lance. Sorry about that. But he's having fun with it.
Yeah.
But we haven't been able to find any people from his mother's side. I'd love to find people from her
Okay.
side of the family to talk to, but at this point, unless I'm going to go out of my way and track these people down and try to contact, which I might, I've done it before. Um, but I need to put that down for now so I can work on other things and, kind of focus on everything else. But nobody else has really come forward. And that was kind of the point. But that's okay too. So,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't have very high expectations for that, for anybody coming forward. It's weird that his dad's first name is McKinley. Like that's his first name.
yeah. Yeah. McKinley
Yeah,
Overby.
McKinley
Yeah.
Overby. All
It is
right.
an interesting, well, his mom's name is Merle. I feel like that's not really a first name either. I
Yeah,
don't,
I mean, I have weird names in my family because like half of my family is very rural, and so like my grandma and grandpa on my mom's side, it was my grandpa's first name was Hollis, and my
oh,
grandma's first name was Zella. So very sort of rural name. I think they're great fucking names, but they're it's not Tom and Jane, right? Like they're not common
right.
ass names or anything. So,
Yeah, no, yeah, I don't think I've ever met anybody named Hollis or Zella or McKinley or Merle. So it
right.
is kind of they're kind of gone now. But yeah, so that's been, like I said, kind of adding a little bit more to it. And that's it really. That's all I've really been up to.
I think that's plenty. I think you've been up to
Probably right.
plenty.
You're probably right. Oh, well, perfect timing. Done anyway.
Yes. Ask not for whom the bell tolls. It
Oh,
tolls for news.
it's news time. We need like a really cool, like a really cool beat for the news. I don't know what yet, but something really cool. Anyway,
Sure.
I have one news. Well, you know how my news goes. It's usually a commentary on kind of what's going on. But
Sure.
we didn't have news last week. You'd think that there would have been a lot more news. There's not. I only have the one this week myself.
Okay.
So I
I
want to
have a
talk
single
about.
news whenever you do yours. I'll do mine after you do yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you. Um, I want to talk about the upcoming Loch Ness monster, or no, I'm sorry, Loch Ness DNA study. So, back in 2018, they did a DNA study of the loch itself, where they took portions of the loch water. We all know about this, but I'm just
Yeah,
recapping.
Neil Gemmell from the University of New Zealand.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yep. And so we took samples of the water and sampled kind of, what type of DNA was there, what kind of life was there in the loch. And, of course they didn't find plesiosaurs or ghost or Bigfoot or whatever you think is in the loch.
They didn't
And
find any ghost DNA?
they found no ghost DNA in the loch
Man,
this time.
I was sure.
I
Okay.
know. I know. We all were, right? So they, found that maybe the culprit for Nessie, not necessarily that there isn't anything out there, but maybe it's more akin to a gigantic eel, which has always been a theory that's been out there, right? Nothing
Sure.
new. But people always, they take issue with that study, and they're like, well, but your sample size, it was so small. How do you know you didn't just miss the ghost DNA or whatever they say?
Right.
And okay, that's valid. So Neil says that's super valid. Let's do it again.
Well, you got to
And
do it again because they didn't even find DNA of certain animals that we know for a fact, like
yeah,
normal shit that we know lives there.
exactly. So they're doing it again, and they're doing it with a much larger sample size, with a slightly different method, so that way they can get water from deeper within the loch and different areas and stuff. They're just trying to do it better this time, and that's totally fine. People are upset about this. Have you seen that there's been fucking outrage about this DNA study?
No, like the only Loch Ness thing that I really follow is like the Loch Ness exploration Facebook group or
Smart.
whatever. So no,
God.
if there's some dumb controversy, it has missed me completely.
And people are just like, well, why would we do it again? We did it once already and then we found nothing. Why would we do it again? Um, because
Because
that's how it works. That's how science works.
yeah, you got to repeat stuff. If there's no repeatability, then you haven't proven anything.
Right. And why would you be mad that we're doing it bigger and better? I mean, in whatever way you fall. Maybe some people are upset because they like to use the argument of the sample is too small anyway, so it didn't matter as evidence for Nessie, right? And this might
Probably.
fuck with that. Or maybe they don't want it done again because this, for them, definitively proved that there was no Nessie, and this might fuck with that. Um, good on this man for doing it again because that's what you're supposed to do. And I don't, this isn't a negative. This is a good thing.
Right. Well, the whole point of it was to try to make a genetic catalog of the life in Loch Ness anyway. So, as a scientist, of course he's going to do it again. He's going to want to keep doing it until he has a comprehensive survey of the genetic material of all life present in Loch Ness. So, yeah, duh. Like I don't understand anybody who would have any kind of issue with this. I just makes no sense to me. Besides the fact, look, he's not doing this to look for the fucking Loch Ness monster. You
No.
giant idiots. Like
Right.
he was never doing it to look for like the Loch Ness monster. He is a fucking biologist. He's been doing it for the reason I just said. And if he happens to find a monster, great. But the last fucking thing he cares about is finding something he probably doesn't even believe in. It's just publicity. It just gives his scientific endeavor some unfortunately much needed publicity because that gets more grant money probably thrown at it. And these things are beholden to the whims of the public and what is popular, probably way more than they fucking should be. So I mean, I get it. I get why he's doing it, but
Yeah.
people be stupid.
People be stupid, and the outreach to it is just it's so fucking silly. Imagine we went to the ocean one time and then they go back and then they're like, well, we're gonna go back in again, and everybody's like, wait, what the fuck, why would you go back in again?
Well, I looked at a cup full of ocean water. I saw what was in there. That's representative of the ocean. Don't worry about it.
Right, why would you go in again? What the fuck? Or space. And I know really we've only been to the moon once, but aren't we all sitting around going, well, when the fuck are we going to go back again? Right.
Well, we've been to the moon more than once, but
well,
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. During that time period, yes, that we were going to the moon for a lot of times and then we weren't.
The moon is the
Right.
only place we've been in space.
Yes, it is. And, now we're just not doing it. But some people, I mean, there's a lot of people that are like, well, we didn't go back. Why is that? And it's like, well, money is why. But,
Yeah.
where's that machismo for testing out the DNA in Loch Ness, you guys? Like, why aren't you all for this? I don't get that. Like I said, if you want cryptozoology, you got to let science. Like, that's the point.
That's true. Well, do we count Mars? Because we never had a manned mission to Mars, but we've sent plenty of like drones and shit. I think that counts. We've been to Mars. I'm
Sure.
saying I'm counting it.
I think
So
we
we've
know
been to
enough
the
about
moon and
Mars. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been to the moon. We've been to Mars.
I think
But
that's fair.
we still haven't fully embraced all of the mysteries of Loch Ness. That does seem ridiculous. If we can go to the moon and we can land on fucking Mars, why don't we know everything there is to know about Loch Ness? It's in our own backyard, people. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Because money.
Yeah.
Because money.
I wonder how much. Well, actually, I wonder how the tourism board feels about it, because most of Loch Ness is so driven by tourism, and understandably so. And I'm not begrudging anybody trying to make a fucking living. We all have to, but that's most of what Loch Ness is now. Is just tourism. And if the Loch Ness monster is solved definitively one way or another, I think certainly disproving the monster would be more harmful. But I almost wonder if like proving that there is something there, but it's some kind of normal biological animal or something, would be even worse.
Yeah, well, I mean, but the reality is that even if we could drain all of Loch Ness completely, people would still say, well, yeah, it's a ghost. So you can't, well, there's no you can't fucking make a ghost appear wherever you want. Or they're going to be like, oh, it was abducted by aliens,
Well,
at that time.
There's no arguing with morons. I mean,
right. People are still going to have some explanation for something, even if we can disprove it.
Sure, they're going to make
Mostly,
up some fantasy fucking LARP explanation
yeah.
that fits whatever they want to believe because reality is far too stressful for them. And that's fine. And I get that. And I have made the joke tons of times about like hoping that fucking Nessie was the ghost of a of a dinosaur or something. But the reality is, Loch Ness didn't even exist when plesiosaurs were alive on this fucking planet. So people can just forget that shit, like for fuck's sake, like keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out, people. It's not that fucking hard.
I think that Nessie sightings are valid, but they're only valid if they also have the ghost of Aleister Crowley riding on the back of it, right? Because
Oh, that's right. I
they're
forgot about
they're
that one.
yeah, because they're buddies in the afterlife or whatever.
Yeah,
So
it's like a demon summoned by Aleister Crowley because
yeah,
reasons.
because reasons, yeah.
Because
So
that guy was anything other than some drug-addled pervert.
that's the nicest way you could put that.
Right.
We'll dive into that topic probably one day, I'm sure, but
Oh, we will. It'll be great.
not
Anyway,
today.
so
So
interesting Loch Ness news. I'm
yes,
looking
Loch
forward to
Ness
see what
news.
comes of it.
Me too. Me too.
Oh boy. All right. Okay. Do we still have time for me to? This is not a very long one. Um, what I have got for us is another report from the void, and so this actually comes from an email that I received all the way back on April 11th of last year, so 2024, and it was originally entitled in the subject line "Two Giant Bats." And so this person wrote to me and they said, "Good morning. I live in Rochester, Minnesota. About an hour ago, while watching for shooting stars on my back balcony, I observed two large bat shaped creatures about 20 minutes apart from each other. Both of them were heading northwest, away from the light pollution of the city." That seems like something of an assumption, but I will forgive them because this is actually a fairly well written email. "It is common to see geese here, and although I saw several geese too, the large bat shaped creatures I observed did not make any noise, nor did they move in the same way. Their silhouettes did not show any kind of flapping motion. Instead, they appeared to be gliding. The second creature that I observed circled several times before continuing northwest, dipping in and out of cloud cover. Their silhouettes were darker than the night sky, but still difficult to see against the clouds. Most bats have translucent wings, which may explain why it was so difficult to see. The first creature was significantly smaller than the second, but both were very intimidating in size. My best guess is a minimum of 8 to 12-foot wingspan on the first creature. The second one dwarfed the first and appeared to be about twice as large. At first, I was confused because I thought I was looking at a small aircraft with no lights, like some kind of glider or similar. The first sighting was at 11:45 p.m. The second was at 12:21 a.m. So this is very interesting to me, obviously, for a number of reasons. For anybody who isn't aware, just a little background on native bat species. The largest bat species native to Minnesota is the hoary bat with a wingspan of 14 inches, which is far smaller than what this witness described. By comparison, the largest bat in North America, the western mastiff bat, has a wingspan of about 2 feet, still way smaller than what they're describing. And even the largest bat in the world, the flying fox, which is only native to parts of the southern hemisphere, has a wingspan of like 5 feet or so. So if what they were seeing was in fact some kind of large bat, it's bigger than anything we have yet seen. So that right off the bat is interesting. Although, what else what else stuck out to me was that, like many anomalous wing creature witnesses, this person also mentioned specifically that what they saw seemed to glide rather than flapping its wings. So if you've seen bats fly at night, which I think a lot of us have, well, I like to watch them in the evening in the summertime. We've got bats that kind of live by us, and you can see them kind of swooping around eating bugs like as the sun goes down. It's majestic. But those little bastards, they got to flap their wings a ton, and they do. And you always see them doing it. They don't just glide slowly past you, right? So that was interesting because it's unusual in terms of like bat behavior. So furthermore, like the third interesting thing here was that it's so unusual for a witness to report multiple creatures in such close proximity. So when was the last time you heard of a cryptid sighting of multiple creatures? It doesn't happen often. You see like a Bigfoot. It's not usually a family of Bigfoot, although I know that's not unheard of. But it is unusual. You don't usually see more than one Mothman, although I do have one witness who has claimed to see 4 at one time. So these weird outliers where people see things that kind of go against the common narrative is always interesting to me. This being a report from the void, I was unable to follow up with this witness, so they were never interviewed or anything. Take it all with a grain of salt. But I don't know. Still interesting to me.
I mean, but I'm just saying those hoary bats, they get around.
Those hoary bats.
You know what I'm saying?
I
Yeah.
know. I know. As soon as I said it.
I've been holding on to that since you said it.
Right. I can just picture your face getting redder and redder as like you're struggling to keep it inside.
It was tough. Well, and then and then I was like, you know what? I don't need a joke for this. And then you said right off the bat, I said, oh, okay, we're gonna play that game tonight. So,
normally I am known for being deadly serious, but in this case, I thought, I can play a little fast and loose with it. It's fine.
I had permission as soon as you did it. Anyway, no, that is interesting. You're right. They don't normally. I've never talked to a Mothman witness that has seen multiples at once. The closest I got was that report, that alleged O'Hare report with the multiple Mothman creatures that were recorded.
Yeah.
But that one I don't put any stake in. And that one wasn't somebody I'd personally talked to. So, that
one
is
of the witnesses that I recommended to Unsolved Mysteries, who was actually on the show, she had seen like 4 at one time. Or at least that's what she told me. But that's the only case ever that of anyone with whom I've ever spoken out of the dozens and dozens of people that I have interviewed personally. So it's rare.
Yeah, very unusual. I mean, if we are saying that and we're not saying that it is Mothman, but if we are saying that it is, I do find it interesting that he'd have a little moth family, right, flying around with him. Because how lonely an existence for you to be the only one, the only singular Mothman. That'd be terrible.
Right.
So I'd like to think that maybe there is more than one for his sanity. But it could just be some strange species of bat. Again, it would be massive and huge, but we know how eyewitness testimony is when it comes to measuring things. They're generally very bad at it.
Right.
So that could be the case here of them just seeing a very large creature that didn't belong, right? But
Sure.
then you have the gliding too, which is also, like you said, it's unusual because they're flapping their flappers. It's not they're not usually a gliding type of animal.
I will say this: I have had witnesses who have mistaken large bird species like herons for bat-like creatures. Now, something like a heron often, like they look like flying dinosaurs. Like that's their profile, you know. So I have definitely received reports from people where I have, well, in one case where I was able to definitively show that it was definitely a bird, probably some kind of large migratory bird. My guess was like a great blue heron just because of where it was, but I don't really know. I can't prove that. And then others where I strongly suspect that is the case based on their testimony. And in every one of those, almost without fail, you've got people describing like bat-like qualities. And this is for a fucking bird, which is the other reason, like, people who want to be like, well, the original Mothman cases, they all describe birds. One, no, they didn't. And two, that doesn't fucking mean anything because people are not great at describing their fucking experiences. And they will always kind of rely on some kind of context that they can pull culturally, right? Like something that they can compare it to. And so like it's not unusual for two people who saw the same thing, one of them to be like, oh, well, it was bird-like, and the other one to say, oh, it was bat-like. Like that's not weird. But what's interesting is if you've got people describing a bird as bat-like, I think that muddies the fucking waters enough for us to say maybe we shouldn't be hyper fixated on what animal people are comparing Mothman to. Fucking nerds on the internet, I swear to God. Armchair researchers just drive me fucking crazy.
I know, right? When the original witnesses tell you that they initially thought it was a man with a limp hobbling around, and then it fucking had wings all of a sudden, I think that's probably not a bird. Okay, I'm not getting on that train right now.
Right, I know. I just randomly thought of it, and I was like, well, I could probably fit a mini rant in here, just a concise 45-second one. Sure.
Just a taste of our rants.
Yeah.
No, I feel you. Absolutely. What they're saying, this is what they mean when they say that it had wings. That's what they meant. Like, it doesn't take a fucking, rocket surgeon to figure out that that's what they're trying to say. So
It sure doesn't.
but very interesting. I wish there had been some follow up. But that's okay. That's
Yeah,
just how
me
this
too.
stuff plays out. Oh, look at that! A perfect wrap up episode this time.
I know, we're
on
doing
both
such a
accounts.
good job.
We are. We're doing great. Well, this will be a fun episode, I think, because we don't get to talk about Ghost a lot here.
No, because you hate ghosts.
I do hate them. I am ghostist. That's not true. I just stuff like this, it messes with my logical thinking. I feel like ghosts aren't dead people. So man, this is a hard topic to cover because I fucking got no rebuttal here, folks. So I'm just gonna set my pride aside now and tell you that like I'm not gonna have a lot of reasonable, prosaic explanations for this stuff because it's fucking wild. And that's exciting to me. Stuff like that, when it comes to ghosts, is exciting. When it challenges me, I love that shit, and this definitely does. So we'll get into it today. We're talking about messages from beyond the grave, things from people that are supposedly dead. Um, I guess Tobias, I'll let you start off. What do you think about this topic in general?
This is one that I think I have struggled with off and on. And if it wasn't for my own experiences and the experiences of people close to me, I would probably be a little more dismissive of it than I am. But quite frankly, you could say that about pretty much the entirety of the paranormal field. So I guess it's not particularly special in that respect. But yeah, this is one where I would hesitate to use the word belief, but I tend to be pretty open-minded about it, and I certainly allow for the possibility that these communications do represent some kind of existence post-mortem. Just again, because of what I have experienced, what people that are close to me have experienced in this specific realm. As far as the phenomenon itself, I mean, yeah, I've been interested in this stuff for most of my life, and especially as a child, I think I found these cases pretty compelling. Like many paranormal phenomena, the older you get and the more you learn, the more the shine starts to come off of this stuff. They get a little tarnished, but this is one that has held up, honestly, a lot better than many others. So
Yeah.
I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying it's interesting. It's interesting stuff.
Yeah. So I tried to specifically vet these experiences that came with proof to back up the claims. We're not talking about disembodied footsteps, right, from unknown entities. We are talking about contact from somebody that you knew, and then they died, and sent you some type of message afterwards. I remember I tell you, the very first time I've ever even knew about this type of concept. was I was probably 5 or 6. I was at my aunt and uncle's house being babysat by them. They were watching The Twilight Zone. And there is an episode where a woman's husband dies and he keeps calling her from beyond the grave. So she answers the phone. He doesn't say anything, or maybe he says like one message here or there, but he's dead. And I remember that there's a shot of the camera that goes to his grave, and there's a fucking phone sitting on the grave. That part is kind of ridiculous, but I remember it
It
very
is.
clearly.
No, I know
Um,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
it stuck with me, for years to come. I was like, oh man, that would be just the worst. That'd be horrifying. But this stuff, it happens, and it happens seemingly a lot. I mean, there are people that dedicate their research in the paranormal just to these types of topics, not just hauntings, but like specifically just phone calls from the grave,
Mm.
which is just super interesting stuff. So I have three stories to share about it. Tobias, I know you have. So I don't know how many you had, so I didn't know how to go about
I've got
going back and
I've
forth.
got a couple personal ones that I can definitely share, and a couple things that Emily has told me over the course of our relationship as well. Before we dive into these, though, we may want to get just a little bit more into like the general topic of messages from the dead, because you mentioned paranormal researchers, but uh, people aren't going to like this, but legitimate scientists look into this too. Like, this is one
Yes.
that psychologists have spent a significant amount of time on, and their their findings are compelling, in that there are multiple studies that have been done showing that upwards of 75% of people report receiving some kind of message from their deceased loved ones. That's really, really interesting stuff. And the thing about these studies, too, is that they don't tend to make a firm determination on what that means outside of its effect on the grieving process. That is to say, they're not writing them off as hallucinations necessarily, or claiming people are just making them up, or anything like that, because we don't know that. And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to prove. And so the possibility remains that this phenomenon could be exactly what it seems like. And there is some fairly compelling evidence that it is. And so what people will most commonly report in terms of contact from dead loved ones, like, they fall into several categories of like most commonly reported phenomena. And so you'll have stuff like a sign or something that they have interpreted as being from their dead loved ones. This is one of the least compelling to me, but it can be anything from like seeing a red cardinal for whatever reason is sort of specifically said to indicate the presence of a dead loved one, to hearing a song that reminds you of them, or finding a penny or a feather. Like, these are all things that people have ascribed to the presence of a past loved one. But then you get into things like smelling a familiar cologne or perfume, or tobacco, the feeling of being touched, of hearing their voice, of seeing their full bodied apparition, or having them come to you either in a meditative, or waking, or falling asleep state of consciousness, known as in alpha state, or having them come to you when you are fully asleep in a dream. And these dreams tend to take on more a larger significance. They seem to be realer than other dreams, and people have a tendency to remember them better than they do other dreams. And so there is some very compelling phenomena wrapped up in these studies that people are reporting. And again, like these are, are legitimate scientific papers, sort of studying the grieving process. So I guess I wanted to impress upon people that parapsychology is itself, I think, a legitimate scientific inquiry. It's not, it's not just goofy shit you see on fucking television. Like none of that's real, but like there is real shit out there, and there are people who are really investigating it in a way that isn't just wearing tight t-shirts and challenging demons to fistfights and shit, right? And
What, are you
that's what
serious?
this is.
There's more
I
than other ways? I mean,
I,
that
I know, right?
that sounds
I
pretty
Who knew?
legit. Yeah, I'd wow. No, and you know what? I'll say, as someone that wears tight t-shirts and challenges demons to fights, it's hard enough to investigate this stuff as somebody that's not doing it with in a lab, right? Like a
Mm,
typical scientific study. Hauntings and things like that. They can be really tough to do. A lot of the times you'll go to said haunted location and you can't just make the ghost do what you want. Like most of the time nothing happens. And it's just the sometimes that it does. That's then you're like, oh, it is weird after all. Um, We've gone, I've definitely done a lot of ghost hunting. I still will ghost hunt to this day. That part is interesting to me. I'm just not interested in taking in other people's content or anything about it just because I'm just not. I don't know. I'm selfish. But we've
I've
gone to
never liked that stuff
locations.
either. So
Yeah, I'm just not into it like that. But we've gone to different locations where nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens, and at the very last seconds something happens. The first one that comes to mind for me is we were in Marietta, Ohio. It was the first lecture I ever gave. It was a big huge career milestone to me, and it was held at a historically haunted hotel. How many times have you heard that, right? There's tons of them.
of
um,
course.
and of course, while we stayed there at the hotel, and it was a super old hotel, um, we did like the spirit box, and we did our little, trying to get these ghosts riled up, and nothing, 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 nothing. After the convention that they had took place, we went down to the basement, and mostly I was told to go down there because they were like, "Oh, you study the injured cold stuff," and I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Well, he's in the basement," and I was like, "What?"
Boo! That sounds dumb.
Right.
Boo!
What do you mean? Well, there's a smiling man down there. And I'm like, well, I'm fucking going down there. Fucking
Right?
smile at me. Do it. I dare you. But we go down there and we're walking the whole thing, and we didn't have a lot of time. And, we kind of get to this area. They had just did like, it's really touristy. So they had done like a seance or something the night before.
Okay.
Yeah. So we get to the boiler room where they had the seance or whatever, and there's fucking chairs all over the place from when they were doing their thing, and it's all dark. And we go to open up the door, and all of a sudden we hear a click. It locks on us, and there's nobody else down there. And it was like, oh, okay, all right, well, whatever. I guess you don't want to smile at me today. So we left. And that was, I mean, we were pretty much out of time anyway. We left. That was that. That happens so often with these locations. And, again, it's just not predictable. So when you're trying to study it academically, it's even harder. You have to, vet stories a little bit and get people that are having these experiences, first of all. And you have to be able to study it real time. And that just doesn't happen very often. But we've tried, and we're still going to continue to try to do that. For some reason, I feel like ghosts are more kind of academically accepted than other topics. I don't know why that is. It just feels that way to me. So,
Sure. Well, I think specifically, if you're on the subject of ghosts, look, I straight up don't put much stock in most of the physical sort of manifestations that people have claimed. First of all, they weren't really prevalent in ghosts and hauntings until fairly recently, and I suspect that's because they make for much better television. Um, Before then, it was really more of the sort of direct consciousness stuff that you would expect, where like you see an apparition, you're visited in a dream, something similar. And that shit, you would have a hell of a time recording. How do you record a fucking dream? You
Right.
can't, like you can't do it. So the closest thing you have then, of course, is just recording the testimony of people who have experienced it. And that's the kind of stuff that I put stock in, because if you think about what a ghost would have to be to exist, right? Most of those physical manifestations don't make any fucking sense. They really, really don't. And I'm not saying that none of them happen and there isn't some heretofore undiscovered telekinetic effect or something that is at play here, but most of them don't make a ton of sense at the frequency they are reported. And I think that they are overreported, mostly because I think a lot of stuff in this realm now is just straight up fucking fabricated. And it's fabricated for clicks and views and ratings and everything else. And so outside of just a few investigators and legitimate scientists, the data is so hopelessly fucking corrupted that you just got to throw all that shit out. It's fucking worthless now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Out of all of the out of all the weird topics we talk about, out of ufology, cryptozoology, the paranormal, the occult, the paranormal is number one. I feel like you're going to find easily more people that have some type of paranormal story, right? Some type of ghost encounter or something like that, than you are going to find people who have been abducted by aliens. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So because it's so popular, because it's so prevalent, usually when I tell people like, oh yeah, I investigate paranormal, the first thing they do is tell me about their ghost story. And I'm just not the one, but I'll be nice. But that's it. They don't tell me about the time, fucking Bigfoot stole their catalytic converter, right? They tell me about the fucking ghost, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
because it's so popular, that also means that it's prone to so much bullshit. And it's unfortunate. Media, television, YouTube, podcasters, they found out that they can make quick money off of this shit. So they're going to exploit the fuck out of it, and exploit they have. So here we are. Which is why I felt like it was important today, for me to share instances of this stuff that holds a bit of weight, that comes with a little proof behind it. Because we need that now more than ever, right? We need to have something tangible that we can look at and go, okay, that's legit. So that's what I did today. Of course, I asked you guys on social media if you've ever received a message from someone that you knew who died, and a lot of you guys said the same thing about what Tobias has wrapped up. Most of the time, it's in the form of a song, in the form of dreams, in the form of smells. We had some varied reactions there, but people that have had those experiences describe it that way. Nobody reported phone calls or texts or anything like that, which is okay. But it's super interesting, and that stuff. I'm not saying that your experiences are invalid and that you didn't have that contact, but what I am saying is that it does come with a bit of nuance, and is up to you to make up your decision about what you experienced. It's still very valid, but it doesn't pass the scientific litmus test for me.
Mm.
And I'm not trying to be rude, but that's what it is. So, without further ado, why don't we get into some of these great examples?
Sure.
So, the first one I wanted to get into is a really, really old case, and kind of a really popular one if you are well versed in West Virginia lore. That's right, I'm talking about the Greenbrier ghost. I know my West Virginians already knew that's what I was going to say. Super popular story, coming out of West Virginia. In January of 1897, 23-year-old Elva Heaster was found dead in her home at the bottom of her staircase. The cause of death was ruled as It's 1897, guys, so bear with me. Everlasting faint. She fainted to death, is what they
Huh.
said. Which is just basic. I mean, it's modern talk for unknown causes, right? Just it happens. People just suddenly die. Her mother, of course, thought otherwise. Because her mother, Mary Heaster, was visited for 4 nights in a row by her daughter's ghost. And her daughter's ghost kept telling her that it was actually her husband, Erasmus. Speaking of weird names, he's got a weird name.
Erasmus, we'll say.
Erasmus, perfect. Who and he was, had been abusing her the entirety of their relationship, and ultimately he broke her neck, and the ghost demonstrated this by actually twisting its head 360 degrees to show that this is what he did to me.
Huh.
So Mary insisted that her daughter be exhumed and thoroughly checked over because she knew that her daughter had a broken neck. And so they exhumed her. And guess what? She did have a broken neck. Her neck
And
was broken.
nobody bothered to check before burying her.
Well, no, because everlasting faint. So
Worst autopsy ever.
it was a real problem at the time. These women, they just fainted to death all the time.
I wish women would stop fainting to death all the time.
That's what
fucking
the
lazy.
coroner said. He was like, God damn, again?
Right? Pull your weight, women. Stop fainting to death and get to work.
It's the 12th one this
God.
week. I don't know what these holes are all over her body, but damn, she really fainted hard this time.
Right? Boy, she sure did like collecting bullets in her torso. Probably unrelated.
She cut off her arms and legs before she fainted. This is crazy.
That's how lazy she was.
But no, she was right. Like I said, she had a broken neck, a crushed windpipe, and she actually had hand marks on her neck. I mean, that's the ridiculous part about it. She had finger marks in her fucking neck. And they're like, oh yeah, she fainted.
A sure sign of endless fainting or whatever the fuck they said.
Of course, the trial then took place, and husband with a weird name, he was sentenced to life in prison. So this is the only case in American history where a ghost testimony helped to convict their killer. So
Yeah.
super interesting. Not the only ghost in all of history to help convict their killer. We're going to talk about that at a later episode, but I decided to omit it this time because it's interesting enough. We'll talk about it at a later date. But the Greenbrier ghost.
Very good. Well, fuck you, Erasmus. Fuck you, shitty 19th century fucking coroners. And good on that lady for getting some justice.
I'm very happy for her. So that is my first one. I don't know I guess it's your turn now.
Oh, are we gonna switch off? Maybe you just go and then I'll get into mine.
Oh, okay. We can do that.
Because they're gonna be like, weird personal ones anyway.
Sure. This one is a phone call from the dead. I want to do a little bit of commentary about phone calls from the dead before that point, because that's kind of how I started. That's kind of what I was looking for when I was doing research on this topic. Phone calls from the dead are huge. They were actually a really big deal following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. We could do a whole episode alone because there's so much content from family members that claim that their dead relatives contacted them after the towers fell.
Yeah.
It's
been a thing forever.
So interesting. And it really has been. I mean, there's so many cases of people whose family member dies and then they get a phone call from that family member's defunct phone number. And it's nothing but static. Sometimes they might hear a phrase or a word. It sounds like their relative, whoever it is. That it has been around for a long time. Not as prevalent nowadays, because it used to kind of be a big thing with landlines. And
it did.
And Tobias, I know that you've used the landline before. I'm not judging. I'm just saying I have to.
I am that old. Yes.
Yeah, me too. And sometimes things would get weird, right? You'd be talking on it, and then like all of a sudden you hear another conversation that's like in a different. Yeah. That's not you, and it's not your friend.
Oh yeah.
So it did have weird glitches and stuff to it, and maybe that's to blame. I don't know. But this this is a wild story. I'm going to tell you about Charles Peck. Okay. So in 2008, there was a terrible, deadly train crash. The Metrolink train was in California, and it had derailed or crashed, or I don't know the details of the crash itself. Look it up if you want them. But there were a bunch of casualties. So Charles Peck happened to be an individual who was on that train. He was moving to the area to be with his fiancee, Andrea Katz. And she was, of course, on her way to the train station when the news broke that the train had crashed. And now she's freaking the fuck out, like, oh my God, he's not okay. Well, Charles' son calls Andrea and says, hey, Dad called me. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but he's all right, And she's like, oh, great. But she still shows up to the train station anyway. And then the family members start trying to, show up to the train station at the same time. Over the course of hours and hours after the train had crashed, all of Charles' family members continued to get phone calls from him, from his cell phone, and none of them could hear him. They couldn't get through. It was just static and weirdness. He called Andrea. He called his son. He called his brother, his mother, everybody, all of his immediate family and close friends, and none of them could quite understand what he was saying. Well, while the search party is it's like hour 5 of them getting these phone calls, and while they're trying to dig people out from the train, they're going from rescue mission to recovery mission at this point. They think they've got everybody, but they got this guy who keeps calling, so they're like, well, let's use the GPS from the phone, let's track this down, let's find his body. And they did. Let's find him. And they track down him being in the first car. They go to the first car, and lo and behold, there he is. However, Charles Peck was, he was dead as fuck. There's no nice way to put it. He was like real super dead. So mangled that they thought that, there's no way this man didn't die on impact. And crazily enough, they did not find his cell phone. Even though it was pinging from the first train car, didn't find his cell phone. Charles Peck called his family members a total of 35 times, with the last call coming in an hour before his body was found, and then never again after that. That's a wild one. I like that one.
Wild.
That is crazy. Of course, Andrea says that, this was kind of a way for her. She thinks this was some way for him to give the family a closure, which I guess what was the alternative? Maybe his body wouldn't get found, and maybe that's his spirit was worried about that. I don't know. Maybe they were worried about that. I'm not sure what the reasoning is. But yeah, people have looked into it. Even though the phone was never found, it was never used again. So why would it call all of his immediate family members, and not every single person? Because some people are like, oh, it was a butt dial, but a butt dial usually calls the same person over and over and over again. This one called everybody. Right. Your butt can't scroll through your phone and figure it. And this was flip phones at the time too. Think of that. It's not a touch screen, right? Maybe it was stolen. Well, I guess so, but like, what kind of fucking asshole immediately goes and fucking raids the train that just crashed and takes one guy's cell phone and goes?
One dude's crappy flip phone. Yeah.
Right. That just doesn't add up. Maybe some type of technical glitch. Well, what fucking timing, right? How bizarre. This dead dude was calling these people, and there's no other explanation for me that makes sense. So
yeah, okay, I'm all in. Yes, agreed.
And then getting into my final story here. This one's fun. This one is not phone calls from the dead. It's not messages from the dead. This is emails from the dead. Okay. Nice. So in June 2011, a gentleman by the name of Jack Froese suddenly passed away in his mid-30s of a massive heart attack. Nobody really expected this to happen. People were mourning, of course. But in November of that same year, Tim Hart, his best friend, received a strange email from his buddy, Jack. The subject of the email was, "I'm watching." The body of this email says, "Did you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your fucking attic." So, lots to say there from Buddy Jack. Now, the reason why this was so touching, so bizarre, First of all, it's because it's from a dead guy's email, but that would be alarming to anybody, no matter what the message is. But second of all, Tim said that kind of right before Jack had died, they had been up in Tim's attic, and which isn't something you just go to your friend's house and go to their attic all the time, right? It doesn't happen.
Not usually.
Not usually. And they were kind of, joking about the fact that it was so dusty and how he needed to clean it, blah, blah, blah. And this was a conversation that they had in private with each other. Nobody else was there to hear that conversation. So that was odd. But even weirder, another person in Jack's life received an email from Jack. A couple of months after Jack had died, his cousin, Jimmy McGraw, he broke his ankle. And in the same month of November, he gets an email from cousin Jack. The subject line, "Hey Jim, the body, how you doing? I knew you were going to break your ankle. Tried to warn you, gotta be careful. Tell Rick for me, great song, huh? You're welcome. Couldn't get through to his email, it didn't work." So, what? You know, people speculate that obviously somebody had access to Jack's email after he died.
Yeah.
But of course nobody fessed up to it. And even if they did, how do they know? I get how they would know that Jimmy broke his ankle, but how do they know about him and Tim's conversation and the joke about the attic? Another theory is that maybe Jack had signed up. There's like services that you can sign up for online to, like, when you die, you have to like check in every so often. And if you don't check in, it will send emails on your behalf that you can send to people from the dead, because the internet's great sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And they speculated maybe he did this. But first of all, it was such a sudden death. Nobody expects to die in their 30s. Second of all, how would he have known that his cousin was going to break his ankle months in advance? Unless maybe Jack was a psychic in life.
Boy, that just opens a whole different can of worms, though. Now we got to start proving that's like
psychic ghosts.
that like psychic shit exists. All right.
But that one's a lot more wholesome. Everybody enjoys it. People of course question, if it was really Jack, why didn't he send an email to his mom? Why these two people? Why nobody else? I don't know. I mean, could somebody have had access to it? Sure. Could it have been a complete hoax generated by these two? Absolutely. I don't see any reason why you would lie about that, but it was definitely reported to different news sources at the time and, kind of spread around a little bit. But I don't know. It's so wholesome that I just want it to be real. That's like what I want to believe.
Yeah, fair. I mean, the guy receiving the emails, if he had his access to his buddy's email, easily could have just sent them to himself.
Yeah.
So who knows? It's not like it would be impossible to fake that, but I'm not the kind of person who, without evidence, will accuse someone of hoaxing something. So,
yeah. I mean, at this point, we have more evidence that it did happen. With all these cases, we've got a fucking a life's conviction of murder. We've got phone records, from 35 missed calls from old Charlie, and now we've got actual emails, that we can look at and see where they were sent from, what time, all that good stuff.
right.
I mean, there's more evidence now that they did happen than they didn't. Just pure speculation that they did not. I would think if you're grieving, the loss of somebody, I mean, the last thing on your mind is to make a fucking spectacle of their death. So,
Yeah.
But that's what I got.
Yeah.
Those are my stories.
I mean, those are great stories. I guess I could see it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility for like me and one of my friends to agree that if one of us died, the other person was going to like spoof messages from the dead from the person who had died, just because we would think that that's awesome. So I don't know. Like I get it. If that's what happened, like I understand. But yeah, I don't know. We don't know that happened. So,
I mean, in the case of Charles Peck, like that, he wasn't. Some people think that well, maybe he didn't die on impact. I mean, I didn't really dig for the gory details, but like they were pretty fucking certain that
Right.
he had died instantly. So it must have been pretty bad. But people question that because they never really went into details about like what do you mean he died? Like his head was cut off right away? You know what I mean? Like how do you know for sure? There's always that air of skepticism that people had, but I'm gonna trust the professionals on that one.
Yeah, that's
So
fair. I mean, that combined with the fact that they didn't find his phone, if he had survived the crash and was actually making those phone calls, he would have had his phone with him.
right, it would have been nearby at minimum,
Right.
and it wasn't. So that one is probably the most compelling to me. Um, I just hope one of my dead friends tells me to clean my fucking attic one day or whatever. That'd be cool.
Don't tell me what to do, dead friend. Don't
Like, who are
judge
you?
me,
You're fucking dead. What do you care?
right? To go clean your fucking attic. Your
It's too,
stupid ghost attic. That's where
too
you belong, you
dusty in
stupid
here
ghost.
for you? You serious? Is it interfering with your vibe?
Yeah, right. Got fucking ghost allergies.
That would
Yeah,
suck to die and have fucking allergies to deal with.
that would suck. Anyway, nobody asked you to haunt my attic, so
Right.
no,
You can go literally anywhere you want to, and you're in my
right?
fucking attic. You clean it.
Yeah, seriously,
I got a job, I
right?
gotta get to work.
That's absolutely right. I mean, honestly, like if I had a friend who was a ghost who was haunting my house and they weren't doing that shit, like if they weren't helping clean up, like why are you even here?
Right.
You don't have a job.
No.
You don't have anything else to do. Obviously, you're just hanging around my house.
Right. I let you watch me shower, and you can't even clean up around here. It's rude.
It's nice of you to let them watch you shower. You're like, I know I don't really have a say in it, but I'm going to give you my permission as a way of taking the power back.
Exactly. It's- I'm gonna do you
This
one
is
better.
my choice.
I'm just gonna keep the shower liner in, no curtain.
Nice. That is
Oh,
thoughtful of you. So
it's empowering. So it's
I bet. Oh boy. Yeah, well, those are going to be hard to follow, but I got to tell you, like these are all things that have either happened to me or happened to people that I know. So this isn't just, and like I said before, what makes this so compelling to me as a phenomenon is that it isn't the kind of thing that you just read about. It's not that difficult to find people who have had these kinds of experiences. I am one of those people. I guess the first one I'll talk about is when I was in grade school, my grandpa thrush passed away. That would be Hollis, and we were pretty close. Um, and it was hard. Obviously, he would. I remember when I was a kid, he was a farmer, and he had dropped out of school in like junior high and ended up joining the Navy during World War II, and then after that, he became a farmer, and he loved to smoke, which is too bad because ultimately that's what ended up killing him. And he loved his like old Milwaukee, and that was a beer that he drank all the time. And he would sit in the kitchen and because he wasn't allowed to smoke in the rest of the house because of us kids, but he could smoke in the kitchen, damn it, because this was still America. And so he'd smoke his cigarettes in the kitchen and he'd drink his beer. And I would go in there because then he would just tell like wild stories, and it was the best. And after he passed away, now that keep in mind this is over the course of years now. I've had several remarkably vivid dreams where seemingly, these are what would be referred to as like afterlife visitations, right? Because it doesn't seem like a normal dream. they're lucid dreams. First of all, like I seem to be like aware of what's going on, and I have a tendency to remember them better than other dreams, and they lack the strangeness, right? Like the surreal aspects of other dreams, because literally it'll just be us just sitting and just talking, and it's just mundane conversation, like literally it's like he's coming to visit and he just wants to catch up. And they're powerful. It's hard to describe, because if somebody hasn't experienced it, um then they're going to write it off as just a normal dream. And I don't know, I couldn't tell you with 100% certainty what exactly is going on. But if it's just my brain talking to itself, then it's become an excellent fucking actor, because again, it really, really strongly feels in that moment like you are talking to somebody else, not in a normal dream way, right? Like you wake up and you still have that distinct feeling. Like I have woken up and I'm just in tears afterwards because it's over, right? Like he couldn't stay. Um and so yeah, like that's, God, I'm like tearing up now just talking about it. And it's just a wild experience. Now we didn't have anything left unsaid, like we knew how we felt about each other. Obviously he was a great grandpa. I was probably an okay grandson. I wasn't that old, so I'm sure I was a little shit, but yeah, there wasn't a lot left unsaid, so it's not like he needed to deliver um like an important, powerful message or something. So literally it would just be mundane conversation. But this isn't the only time this has happened to me. I had a friend of mine who, the summer before Emily and I got married, he passed away very suddenly. It was a drug overdose. And we were really, really close. And he wasn't just close with me, he was close with my brother. My brother and I are only 2 years apart, so we have a lot of the same friends. And this guy, he was like a member of our family, like my whole family knew him. And he was over uh, a lot, holidays and everything else. And so we were close. We were really close. He was in my brother's wedding. He would have at least been at mine at a minimum. Um, but yeah, so we had actually been roommates at one point, because again, we were really, really good friends. And that's sort of when he started getting into drugs a lot. And that created something of a rift, because I was not into drugs to that level. I was trying to get my life together. I was going back to college, and I really wanted to do something, right? And there wasn't one moment where we just like broke up as friends, but we definitely started drifting apart. Like I would still see him, because again, super close with my family, but things were never the same. I kind of feel like he chose the the drugs over his friends, but we all know that's not how addiction works, and it's probably not fair, but that's certainly how it felt. And so when he passed away suddenly, I mean, that was really hard. I always thought that there was time, like there was time for him to get it together. There was time for him to get clean, like he'd figure it out. But it just never happened. And I always felt like I could do more. Like there was something else that I could have done. Like I blame myself. I kind of felt like I just quit on him. And if I hadn't have done that, then maybe things would have been different. But he actually came to me again in one of these seemingly lucid dreams, and this is another one. It's happened several times, but this was the most impactful one. Um, Again, like it's like he was just there, and he was in the room, and we were just talking, and I remember specifically him saying to me, like in all earnestness, which was hilarious because we had some heart to hearts as friends often do, but it was rare for us to be completely serious with each other. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah, no, it's I remember him specifically, like us sitting there and him being like, "Hey, it's not your fault. Like we're good." Like he needed me to know that, and it was just again, it's hard to describe because again, like I woke up and I'm just bawling because I needed to hear that so bad. And again, like from the outside, yeah, it would be easy for you to say, okay, you needed to hear that. And that's your subconscious telling you what you needed to hear. And if that's what somebody believes, I can't fucking talk them out of it. Like I don't have any evidence that's going to convince them other than like I was there and I know how it felt. And if that was a dream, like it was as real as me talking to you right now, you know? Um, so yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. And so when you hear people talking about these kinds of experiences, or rather when I hear about people talking, or I hear people talking about these kinds of experiences, I know what they're talking about. Like I know how they feel, and why it's so difficult for them to dismiss it as just a dream, as hallucination or something, like I've had fucking dreams, I've even had lucid dreams that I knew were still just normal dreams, but this wasn't that, like this was something else. Um, so yeah, I mean, those are mine. They're not the only ones that I've encountered in my life. I've had relatives, of course, who have come to me with similar stuff. I remember after my grandfather, again, this is Hollis, passed away. My cousin was born, and I remember her mother, my aunt, saying that one night she had woken up to check on my cousin, who of course was an infant at that time, and she swears that she saw my grandpa, and he was standing in the hallway at her door, checking on her because he was never able to do that. She was born after he had passed, and not a super long time after. And so there's that. I remember Emily telling me about a couple of experiences she had. One in which this would have been a couple of years before we met, but there was one in which she had woken suddenly one night to see a figure in her bedroom. And as she looked at this figure, it sort of coalesced into the apparition of her own grandfather who had passed away. She said she recognized his glasses and a sweater that he liked to wear. And at the time, she had just gone through a breakup, and he had. As he was there, he had said something like, "I'm really sorry that it didn't work out, but you're going to be okay." So, I mean, that again is just a powerful experience for somebody to have. I remember her telling me on another occasion she'd had a dream visitation, not unlike those that I had in my life. And in one of those, and this was particularly interesting to me, um, she said that that her grandmother and her grandfather were both there, and that her grandmother had. She remembers specifically her saying something like, basically explaining to her grandfather how to come visit their loved ones, but that it's very very difficult. But and this is difficult, but it's still the easiest way to actually do it. Is coming to them in their dreams. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like maybe I can't be objective about these because I'm just too close to it, right? But those are my experiences, and these are other things I've heard, and I have to take them seriously just because of the things that have happened to me.
Well, I can tell you, I didn't want to interrupt you at all, so I was just letting you go.
All right.
Um, so from going back to your friends, from someone who had an intimate relationship with an addict, and what I mean is not a sexual intimacy, but a personal intimacy. My father died of a drug overdose in November of 2023,
Yeah.
and there there is a lot of guilt that revolves around that because I also, had cut him off. Well, I guess that's my dad saying hi. Um, it wasn't, but well, it might have been. I don't know. No, I had cut him off, a couple years prior, and so I always expected it. My dad was a drug addict from since before I was born. It always happened.
Right.
Always expected that phone call. My dad killed someone, got away with murder, and still continued to use drugs. So if you do that and you still do it, you're not going to quit. But you still grapple with a lot of guilt, because you wonder maybe I made the wrong choice by choosing me, because that is ultimately what I did was chose me.
Right.
And maybe that was wrong. Maybe if I hadn't done that, maybe if I had pushed him more and let him know that I would be there no matter what and made that clear, maybe he would have stopped. I did not have that experience where my dad had come to me in a dream and talked to me. So if you try to wrap it up into, oh, it's just trauma and it's just your brain working out trauma, well, then how come I didn't have that experience? And this is my fucking dad we're talking about, right? Why didn't my trauma kick in and I was forgiven in a dream instead of through therapy, right?
Right. Right.
Didn't happen that way. Which of course I understand now. It's not, and for anybody who's had that type of loss, it's not your fault, and you do come to that realization eventually. But
You
um,
do.
yeah, so same thing. On the flip side of that, I have a particular song that I used to listen to with my grandma. We used to listen to a lot of gosh, a lot of Conway Twitty. And
Ladies and gentlemen,
ladies
Mr.
and
Conway
yep,
Twitty.
Mr. Conway Twitty, and I have his "Hello, Darlin'" on my Spotify playlist, and
That's the best.
it is such a good song. And in me, for my brain, I was super close with my grandma. I lived with her for a time, and she had millions of grandkids, but I was her favorite, and and every time that song comes on, I like to think that it is literally a hello from my grandma.
Yeah.
And, is it so crazy that, that it is or it isn't? What does it matter? It gives me comfort at the end of the day. Right.
Right.
So I take that and I internalize that. Again, that one, it's going to play on my Spotify playlist. It's on there. I put it on there. It's no surprise. But I always shuffle. So there's that. But anyway, so arguments to both being for and against, right? It could be something that we do to ourselves subconsciously, even half consciously sometimes to give ourselves some type of comfort, or it certainly could be something even bigger than that. And you're right, nobody can take that away from you or Emily or anybody else that has those same exact experiences. That feeling that you describe, I know what you're talking about, just in different areas of my life with different experiences that I've had. And there's just nothing like it unless you know it. And the people
Right.
that know listening to this right now, they know, everybody else is just like, whatever, trauma, and that's fine.
Right.
We don't
And
blame
there's
you.
no talking people out of that.
Right.
And I get it. It would be so hypocritical of me after having said so many times before that it's unreasonable for us to expect people to believe things without evidence to suddenly start expecting people to believe things without
Yeah.
evidence. So I don't. The
Yeah.
only time I get fucking mad is when people try to talk me out of my experience like they fucking know better.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
they don't fucking know better. It's okay if they think differently based on the evidence that we have, but for somebody to butt in and say, oh well, no, this is really what happened to you, eat shit. You don't fucking know. Nobody
Yeah.
knows.
Exactly. And at the end of the day, that's the reality of it. I did think of a kind of not my experience, but somebody in my family who had a dream dead person. I'll share that experience. Why not? We're here.
Yeah.
So my cousin, kind of leading up to her mom's death, while her mom was still awake, she started having dreams of a little boy. And they would be dreams of, like, her as a kid, little boy as a kid, them playing together, her as an adult, her, helping take care of the little boy, whatever. The little boy was there. And her mom had kind of a deathbed confession. And it was that my cousin was originally a twin and consumed her twin like they do
Okay.
in the womb. And then while she was dying, her mom had pointed out the little boy that was there with them in the room, and she had commented. She was like, "Who's that?" And everybody's like, "What? Who?" And she was pointing to an empty space of nothing, and she was saying, "Oh, he looks just like another family member. I don't want to out anybody." Which was a surviving family member, which is, of course, implying that maybe that little boy was there with her. Her own little boy was there with her. So, that's bizarre because then, okay, if that's some weird trauma, I mean, that's a lot of coincidences, to jump through.
Right.
Because there was no trauma. It was a sibling she had never met. It just wasn't that. It's a weird story. And sometimes things like that happen. And it's just, will we ever get to the bottom of it? I have no idea. But to invalidate anybody's experiences is definitely not the stance we like to take. And as somebody who frequently gets on her pedestal and yells about how I don't think ghosts are dead people, I can definitively tell you guys that most of that comes from my own hangups with what happens to us after we die, because I hate to think that we just stay here. That sounds fucking terrible, and I would be so mad if I have to spend eternity on this planet.
I don't think, even based on what we've just been talking about, that seems super likely. Even if there is some existence after this, if our consciousness persists, it seems like it's super difficult to interact with anybody still here in their mortal coil, right? Which heavily would imply that you're not just hanging around Earth. You're doing other stuff. You've got other dimensions to worry about.
Well, that's true. I mean, because you can go back and see your people, doesn't mean that, all the other ghost stuff is true. Like all the other shit that you see out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like walking up the steps at 2 a.m. every single Saturday night or whatever. Because
Sure.
again, I'd be angry if that's what I had to do every Saturday for the rest of
You
eternity.
just have to walk up the steps every Saturday at precisely 2 a.m.
Right. What if I'm busy?
You're like, I got drunk and fell up the stairs one fucking time, and you're telling me that's how I have to spend my whole afterlife?
Right.
Fucking piece of shit.
And now my new dead friends, they're like, "Hey, we're all going to get together on Saturday night about 2 a.m." And I'm like, "Well, can't go. Sorry."
I'll be falling up the stairs. I don't know. You know how
Again.
it is. We all got to do our one thing.
And they're just like, "Yeah, work sucks,"
Yep.
So I mean, that makes me mad. But I'm saying when I unpack it, a lot of it is a me issue. when I say stuff like, "Oh, well, this ghost says it's Aunt Edna," like, why would you believe that ghost? That's because I have trust issues, you know? I'm not
Sure.
gonna fucking believe some ghost, you know? I don't even believe most of the people in my life, you know? Why would I believe
Right.
you?
I'm not gonna be trusting some ghost like a sucker. You go ahead and trust a ghost if you want, but you turn around and your wallet's missing, that's on you.
That's your business, you know? But it's one of those things where, like, I don't know. UFOs, there's physical evidence somewhere, right? Cryptids, there's physical evidence somewhere. Ghosts, there just is almost none, and I that drives me nuts. But again, the most popular of all these subjects, the most well known of all these subjects, clearly people are having experiences somewhere.
Right.
For some reason, we think that they are dead people. Like there's a correlation for whatever reason because we experienced it directly. Because this person resembles that person that lived here 100 years ago and got drunk and fell upstairs or whatever. I mean, we've attributed it to death. And my brain just has a hard time connecting those things. Again, I will never invalidate you and your experiences. That is not my job. My job is to find facts, um,
Sure.
or at least as close as I can get. So I just want to throw that out there for everyone.
Well, I think that when you're talking about the potential for like consciousness surviving bodily death, these kinds of messages from the dead are some of the most compelling evidence, right? Because just because a book fell off your bookshelf at midnight, or you heard some footsteps, or a door slammed or something, that doesn't have to have been caused by some kind of apparition or spiritual being, right? But it it I think it would arguably stretch like credibility even more to say that, like, oh, all ghosts are ultra terrestrials, like my dream visitations were caused by ultra terrestrials instead of my dead loved ones, is more far-fetched than just being like, dude, your dead friend came back to tell you that it was okay. Like it is more difficult to believe that an ultra terrestrial did that than it would be to just believe that my fucking friend did it, or my grandpa did it, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's what's compelling about these cases. But you're right, like it gets difficult when you've got people's internal biases that they're applying to the narratives of their experiences. I'll give you an example from my own life. So, I always had seen like weird shadow people and stuff growing up. And after I started doing this, I think I had probably written at least my first book. No, actually, my second book was out. And I remember, my niece had started reporting that she had maybe seen some weird stuff around the house because her mother and her lived at my parents' house. And I remember my sister coming to me and saying, like, hey, I saw one of those shadow people, I think, in mom and dad's living room. And sorry, Chrissy, if you're listening to this, I'm not trying to pick on you. This is just what I think. And she said to me,
Is that your cat?
yeah, I don't know what the fuck's going on with the cat. It's probably a ghost.
It's a ghost cat, clearly.
Right. So anyway, okay. So I
I'm
think the
sorry.
cat has finally shut up. No, I get it. It was loud as fuck.
It's funny.
Right?
I was like,
Fucking
is that
animals.
coming from outside my window? Do I need to go
I'm like,
rescue somebody?
right? No, I'm like surrounded by animals at all times. And I'm just waiting for them to start being little fucking terrors. But anyway, okay. So my sister's thing, she says that she saw this shadow person, and then I'm not saying that she's lying about that or anything. But then she said, I think it might have been grandma coming to check on us. And I hope she's not listening to this actually, because like internally, I'm like, the fuck? Like, what makes you think that? Like that doesn't make any sense. There's nothing about these shadow fucking people that has ever indicated that they are dead loved ones or even human, but externally I'm just like, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe, yeah, okay, could be, because I can't take that shit away from her, like, and I wouldn't try to take it away from anybody if I didn't have to, but it is true, like you end up getting a wide range of phenomena uh, ascribed to a particular explanation, not because it actually, fits contextually or because there's some compelling evidence to connect it, but because that's just what people want to believe, like,
Yeah.
and part of our job as investigators is kind of teasing the story out of their narrative to narrow down like what happened, like what actually happened, and and what they believe is the cause of what happened, or what is the narrative that they have applied to whatever phenomenon they've witnessed. And it can be tough, and it leads to a little bit of cynicism sometimes, like I get it.
Well, and we see that in all areas of these topics. We saw that just last week, right, with Jack and his story. Um, the perception of this at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if we believe Jack's story or not. He believed his story.
Yeah.
That's where it's super important. Does it matter to proof and evidence of the paranormal? Of course it does. Of course it does. But we have a very well, we'll use the word again, a very intimate job when we're talking to these people. We have a duty to handle these topics with the utmost care and respect, because we are dealing with people. Without the people, there are no stories of any of this stuff. And if we were just assholes to them all the time and we're like, well, I don't believe you just because you got no evidence, like, we wouldn't be doing this. Nobody would want
Right.
to come to us. So I'll never be that person. But I will have generalized opinions about things just based off of what I've personally experienced and have encountered so far. And I'm not doing it to be a jerk. It's just that I wish there was something more, that that could sway me one way or the other. I wish I could get a message from a dead relative that was concrete. If they could give me any gift after they died, that'd be it. Give me something. Be
Right.
awesome. But as much as I ask over and over and over again, it doesn't happen. Just like, my God, okay, skinwalkers. I know this is a weird way to go with it, but people say you can't say skinwalker or you're going to draw skinwalkers to you. And I'm
Come
going to
here.
tell
Come
you,
on, skinwalkers.
right? I'm going to say skinwalkers all the fucking time. Oh, and I do, and I say it all the fucking time, and I have yet to encounter a skinwalker. So obviously, like, that's not a fact, right? Because it hasn't happened.
Well,
Um,
they're not Voldemort. Like, why is that even a fucking thing? You just can't say skinwalker.
that's what the
That's dumb
internet
as hell.
says. It is so dumb. I'm not gonna get into it, but it's a thing that people say, and it's like, well, okay, skinwalker, skinwalker, skinwalker. Do I need to go in front of the mirror, right, in front of the bathroom mirror, say it 10 times or whatever with the lights off? I will, you know, and
I
guess
mean,
what? Nothing's gonna happen. Um, so I have to challenge those ideas. I have to challenge those things, because if I'm not challenging them, then what the fuck am I doing here except for parroting all the shit that everybody's already said? So,
right.
you know,
Although if you do try that, in the dark in front of a mirror, and Tony Todd shows up with a hook hand, that's on you.
that would
You
technically be my first message from the dead. May God or whomever rest his soul.
Oh yeah.
So that's so sad. That one hit hard. That hurt me right in the
Yeah,
feels.
that does suck. Tony Todd was one of my favorites.
Precious human, precious human. But please,
Yeah.
Tony Todd, if you can give me that gift of message from the dead, I'm accepting. We were, you followed me on Twitter, right? You must be following me in the afterlife. So
Sure. That was a Candyman joke, though. That wasn't
it was.
a one of my favorite actors passed away joke.
It's both, and that's okay.
It could be two things, I guess. I meant it as a Candyman joke.
You did. It was a good one. Um, No, but yeah, I'm just saying, like I said, if I don't challenge these things, then I'm not doing a very good job. So I have to challenge them, but I'm not going to challenge them to your face. I'm not going to challenge your experience because that's not my job. That's between you, yourself, and maybe a therapist if you feel like you need to go that route. That's up to you, not me.
That's true. And
So,
don't be afraid of that route, actually.
no,
There's no shame in it.
no, not at all. Not at all. They're a lot more open minded than you think.
That's true.
But again, that's why I felt like it was important for me personally to bring stories with some type of actual evidence to them and not just anecdotal evidence. Again, this whole field is based off of anecdotal evidence. But I wanted to bridge that gap a little bit and show that we can have both.
Sure. No, I thought that worked out great. Like you bringing those particular reports and then, me having some personal experiences kind of shows the entire breadth of the phenomenon there.
Yeah, it is a really interesting topic. I kind of got into it on my own. Not doing some of the stuff I like genuinely research. Like sometimes, of course, week after week we have to have a new topic. I do research that week for that show.
Yeah.
This was one of those that I have genuinely researched because I thought it was interesting. So I'm more than happy to hear other people's, encounters of, what contacts you've had from people that who have passed on. What do those look like? Did you get a phone call? Did you get an email? I'd love those. I'd love to see those.
Please only send emails if you are deceased. If you are already deceased, send emails.
And only if you're
Right.
deceased.
If you are deceased, and only if you are deceased. My absolute best coast to coast, just angry at people not being time travelers using the time travelers line impression.
We're going to get so many.
Art Bell got so mad at people if they weren't time travelers and they called the time traveler line, though. So mad. And I get it, because fuck those people. He said specifically, you're supposed to be a time traveler. Don't use the time traveler hotline if you're not a fucking time traveler.
You got to follow the rules.
Seriously.
Rude.
What, do you think this is a joke?
if you're deceased, hey, you know what? But I'll say, if you're deceased, and only if you're deceased, you can send us an email. We have an email on Wednesdays. We talk weird at gmail.com. Also, we have a phone line. You can call us 773-59-WEIRD. If you're dead, you can call us. Call us and leave us a voice message. Tell us what it's like. What's your job in the afterlife? What do you have to do on what day of the week at what time? We're curious.
I want to know.
What's the pay like? Do you have a 401k? Does that matter? I guess.
Is Beetlejuice nice in person?
That's a good one.
These are the questions.
We gotta know. You tell us about Beetlejuice. He probably parties hard.
Yeah. I bet a little of him goes a long way, though.
Oh yeah. You're like, man, this fucking guy. After the fifth party, you're like, fucking Beetlejuice again. Really?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So Tobias, any closing statements for either the dead or the living listeners?
Well, this will be for both, I guess. No, yeah, I mean, if there's anything that I hope people take away from this, it's that your experiences are your own, and so are everybody else's. And so when you are interacting with someone who has had an experience, it's not necessarily your job to try to talk them out of it. And I don't think that should be your goal. I think that our goal as investigators and researchers when dealing with witnesses should be what I like to call compassionate professionalism, wherein keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out. And at the end of the day, if you don't have definitive proof of some contrary explanation for their experience, then you have a duty to allow for the entire array of potential explanations for that experience. And that can go a long way. That can be very comforting for people. And I think that it's just basic human kindness. So if I had to sum it all up, practice basic human kindness. I can't believe I actually had to tell people that, but here we are.
I mean, that is never a bad thing to do, is to tell people to
True.
be nice to each other. Here's what I'll say. Put it in your will. Put some pact in your will. Do your will. I don't care how young you think you are. Do your will. That's important. And when you draw it up, put, when I'm dead, I'm going to come back in the form of this song, or I'm going to come back, or, I'm going to do something, right? Make a prompt. That way, people know. More people should be doing that. Like, we really could actually study this phenomena a little bit. you know. But definitely make a death pact with at least somebody. Let somebody know. But put it in your will. If not, that's paper. All right, we need a paper trail on this, folks. In all seriousness, I definitely agree with Tobias. Treat everybody with the utmost kindness. There's no reason to be nasty, even if you think that they are batshit crazy. There's still no reason to be rude. Not that you should go around thinking that about folks unless you got proof. But either way, treat everybody nice. That's important. And if we do happen to get emails and text messages from the dead, guess what? You can find them on the Patreon. Patreon.com/Wednesdays Talk. Definitely go subscribe. Tobias has some Mothman encounters up there. You guys need to go check out. We would be more than happy to do more stuff with it. You just gotta come on and just tell us what you want to do. Right? It's your money. We'll do whatever you want for your money.
There are so many more of those Mothman reports
So
too.
many,
Like they're all of the Mothman reports that we received from the Unsolved Mysteries production crew after that episode aired. And there's so fucking many of them. I'm still in the A's. Like I've been reading 3 of them at a time. And I'll continue doing that like every week until they're done. But I'm not even out of the A's yet. So
there's like
it's going to be a while.
well over 100.
There's so many.
There's so many. And every time I ask you guys what you want to hear on the show, you always mention Mothman or winged humanoids or whatever. I mean, this is your chance to go hear more of that shit from people, from real people who
they're interesting. They are interesting reports. And when I don't just read them, like I've got thoughts that I share. And if I have actually had contact with that witness, which has happened, and I actually mentioned it in the very last one that I did. That was one of the witnesses that I had interviewed. Then I'll talk about that too. So if you want the inside scoop on some of those reports, check it out.
Yeah, definitely check that out. So with that being said, guys, we will see you back here next Wednesday.